Dr. D. Sangeeta is currently a senior lecturer at the Department of Chemistry, Anna University, Chennai. She has completed her PhD in the field of polymer chemistry from the University of Madras in the year 2000 and has teaching and research experience of more than 10 years. Her research interests are in the following fields: fuel cells for clean energy, functional membranes for desalination, and polymers for biomedical applications. She has published more than 20 research articles in national and international journals and has more than 40 research articles in national and international proceedings. Presently, she is guiding 6 research scholars for their doctoral degree.
Welcome to the UGC lecture program on the topic of solar energy, part 2. In the part 1 of solar energy, we talked about the very basic fundamental information about what is solar energy basically, how they are originated from, how much amount of the solar energy is falling on the earth surface, and how do we capture that particular energy, and more importantly we discussed about the importance, significance, basic uses and applications of solar energy in various fields. Now let us go into the second part of the solar system, where we will be talking about the methods of conversion of this solar energy into the useful forms of the energy. Basically, how do we generate energy from solar energy is based on two methodologies. The production of electricity from sunlight is based on the thermal conversion or the photo conversion. These are the two important methods available. In the first conversion method, that is the thermal conversion method, we make use of what is called a solar trough or a solar collector. This solar collector does the job of collecting the heat and then transfers into the other fluids wherein we can drive the energy from. The second type of conversion is based on photo conversion. This type of conversion is also called as quantum conversion. Here we make use of what is called a photovoltaic cell. This photovoltaic cell has the capacity to convert the photo energy, the radiant energy from the solar, into electricity directly. Let us look into the details about these two types of conversions, which are essential to make use of such an abundant and freely available solar energy to make use of them into our various activities. The principle behind the thermal conversion is that thermal conversion basically involves the absorbing of thermal energy in the form of infrared radiation. So it is the thermal or the heat energy that is absorbed by suitable materials, which has the amount of energy stored in the form of infrared radiation. The solar energy is an excellent source of low temperature heat, and when this heat is able to be concentrated, focused, the amount of heat that can be generated can be increased and further they can be utilized. Solar energy, which is an excellent source of low temperature heat, can be useful for heating water, buildings and so on. In the case of thermal conversion, the solar heat can be absorbed by solar collectors. They are also called as flat plate collector, and later after the absorption of the solar heat by the solar collectors, they can be transferred into a fluid, either air or water or any other fluid medium that may be passing through the tubes in contact with the hot surfaces. When there is an absorption of heat by the solar collector is happening, that particular amount of heat that is transferred into the solar collector can once again be transferred into the flow medium, where you can have a fluid like air or water, which in turn carries the heat with it and transfers into our useful systems. Here in this context, it should be noted that several countries have already developed efficient solar heating systems and technologies for heating their buildings and also to heat the water for their usages. Here is a classical example of a system which is showing how the solar collector is useful in heating the water. This solar heating system is basically a direct heating of fluid is what is taking place, and there is no conversion into electricity is happening in this thermal conversion process. The various important components of this solar heating system includes solar thermal collector, the one which basically primarily receives the energy from the sun. Then the second component is the fluid system, which basically moves the heat from one place to the other place. It does not involve any electricity. And thirdly, the reservoir or the storage form to stock the heat for our later utilizations. And such a solar heating system can be commonly used for heating water for home, swimming pools and so on. Now, this particular picture explains how the operation is taking place. We have the sun radiations are falling on the solar collector, the flat plate collector, which collects the heat which is getting transferred to it. Now there is a fluid that is moving on in this system through these wires, through these connections. This fluid which is moving here comes in a cold condition initially, pumped through a pump, reaches the solar collector. When the solar collector is heated up because of the solar energy, it picks up the heat from this area of the solar collector, and the hot water or the warmed up water again flows down and gets into this storage or the reservoir point. In the reservoir, another circuit is maintained for the flow of cold water which is supplied through this place, and because the heating is taking place through this coil, this cold water is getting heated up and then it moves on to our various utilizations through the taps. So this is a basic working principle of a solar water heating system. Another example is the solar collector, the one which you have seen in the earlier picture also. How do we define the solar collector? A solar collector or a flat plate collector is simply a simple blackened surface that is covered with a clear glass or a transparent plastic sheet to prevent the escape of heat. So what is a solar collector? It is a simple flat plate collector which has got a blackened surface in order to absorb the maximum amount of energy, that is covered with a transparent glass or a transparent plastic sheet. This is available in order to prevent the dissipation of the heat that can take place otherwise. So that is your solar collector. Such a solar heating system may be classified depending on the way in which the solar energy is going to be captured, number 2 converted, and number 3 distributed. There are different ways of capturing the energy, converting them and then storing them in a particular form, and then thirdly, how do we distribute this amount of stored energy to our various uses. Basically there are 2 types. They are called active system and passive system. Let us see the difference between an active and a passive water heating system. In both the methods of heating water, that is in both passive as well as active methods, basically a flat plate collector or a solar collector is used in order to absorb the sun's energy to heat the water. The water then circulates throughout the closed system, and this happens due to the convection currents. Tanks of hot water are used as storage tanks. So what is happening is the water is being circulated in a closed system, and this is happening basically due to the convection currents. Convection current is the one which is naturally happening. You need not have to spend your energy for this movement. This is happening because of the difference in the temperature of the heating fluid. Once a particular fluid at a particular area is getting heated up, its density becomes lesser and it has a tendency to flow to the other areas where the water is densely available, or the cold water is getting transported to the hot area, and the hot water or the hot fluid gets transferred to the colder region. So, this particular movement of fluid happens automatically, and this is called convection currents. So, that happens. This is a clear picture of a solar collector plate. Let us look into the details of this picture. Basically, the solar collector has a metal frame box outside. This is followed by the transparent covers, the plastic sheet or the transparent glass plates, to avoid the dissipation of heat and to concentrate the solar energy that is falling on this sheet towards inside of this structure. Then just below the transparent covers, you have the absorbing layer or the absorbing plate. So, in the absorbing layer, the heat is getting actually absorbed. What happens here is you have a plumbing fitting over here in which the water is getting circulated, water or any other fluid is getting circulated through all these tubes where the liquid flow happens, and then the heat is getting transferred through these tubes because they are going to move along, and subsequently they will be reaching the storage tank where the heat is going to be stored. Beyond this layer, you have a rigid insulation. This is followed by a medium kind of insulation. Again, this insulation is provided in order to prevent the dissipation of the heat. So, this is a basic structure and working of a solar collector, a metal frame followed by a transparent cover which allows the heat energy to flow through the area. The solar energy gets converted to heat energy because the tube water or the medium which is going to be inside these tubes are going to be heated up. They get absorbed with the heat, they transfer the heat to subsequently the next area where the storage of heat is going to take place, and in order to prevent any losses, any dissipation of heat, you have a layer of rigid insulation followed by a medium insulation. This is the actual structure of a solar collector. Now, there are two different words, solar panels and solar collector. There is a basic difference between a panel and a collector. A solar panel is the one which converts only the selected wavelengths of the light which is going to fall on it into the electricity, whereas the solar collector can transform short wavelengths into long wavelengths and trap the amount of energy that is available in the form of heat which can be transferred and then transported to our various requirements. So, a solar collector is the one which has the potential to convert even the shorter wavelength radiations into the longer wavelength radiations which can trap the energy and store it in the form of heat energy. This is an additional advantage in the case of a solar collector. Now, the solar collector pictures are shown over here. There is an array of solar collectors here. The basic idea is to collect the light from many reflectors spread over a large area at one central point in order to achieve the high temperature. So, this picture, which is a solar collector shown here, these are all the array of solar collectors. The very basic idea behind these solar plates are that they have to have a larger surface area in order to convey or collect the maximum amount of heat towards them, and all these distributed form of energy, heat energy which is available throughout the surface area should be collected or focused into one particular point where you can achieve the highest temperature that is possible. So, that is a basic idea of having an array of collectors and concentrating the amount of heat energy to one single point, one central point where the highest temperature can be achieved, which can be of much use for us for our applications. Now, these are all the pictures of the parabolic dishes and the troughs. Because all these work best under direct sunlight, the parabolic dishes and the troughs must be directed throughout the day in the direction of the sun. So the idea behind using the parabolic dishes and troughs are that they have the capacity to change their direction, whatever direction the sun is going to be available, so that you maximize, you concentrate, you enlarge, increase the amount of energy that can be obtained from the solar power. So they turn in the direction where the sun is going to move and collect the maximum possible energy that is possible to be collected by them. That is the basic idea behind using such parabolic dishes and troughs as solar collectors. Now, let us go deeper into the difference between the active and the passive heating systems. In the case of active heating system, in this method, either a blower or a pump has to be used in order to circulate the hot air or the water from the collector surface to the required place. So in order to make the circulation to happen because of the hot air or water, you may make use of either a blower or a pump. Such a system where you make use of a pump you call as the active heating system. So this is an active system for heating the water. This particular picture again demonstrates how the solar collectors, they receive the energy from the sun, and the heated fluid gets circulated through the tubes, comes to the heat exchanger, which is otherwise called as a solar storage tank, and here in the heat exchanger the heat gets exchanged to another medium of fluid which is going to flow through it. Basically that water which has come from outside, that is heated up, and the solar heated water is taken away to the gas or the electric water heater, and further it is heated up to get supplied into the homes and houses. So what is happening here in this circulation is the heated fluid comes and gets exchanged its heat with the fluid available here, and then it becomes colder, and the cold water is going to go through the pump into this solar collector, back to the solar collector in order to pick up some more heat from there. So you have a pump controller to control the pump, to control the flow of the fluid from the solar collector to the heat exchanger and further, and you have a control on the heat exchange system too. A pump control does all these functions together. So in addition to this, you can have an antifreeze solution. This is basically used in cold countries, especially in the active system, because these antifreeze solution will not leave the freezing to happen. So active system may use antifreeze units so that the liquid does not freeze if the outside temperature is going to drop below the freezing. This is very useful in cold countries. Now let us have a short break and then move on to the passive heating system. Welcome back after the small break. Now let us move on to the second system, which is based on passive system, that is passive heating system. In this system, we don't make use of a pump or a blower. Instead, the natural convection current gets operated. The natural convection current that is created when the hot air or the water rises due to its lower density. This is what is utilized for the movement of the fluid and for the transfer of the energy from one system to the other. And basically there are no moving parts in this passive heating system methodology. Such a solar heating system can be either connected to a heat exchanger, or the hot air may be forced onto a bed of rocks or gravel, and subsequently they can be stored in the form of a sensible heat for use at a later stage. So the basic difference between active and passive is that in the case of active heating system, you essentially make use of a pump or a blower to maintain the flow of fluid for transferring the energy from one area to the other. In the second case, that is in your passive heating system, it is done naturally, or you make use of the natural convection current. Basically, there are three modes of heat transfer that are possible. They are called conduction, convection and radiation. In the kind of conduction mode, the electrons or a metal body if you take, there is a movement of energy from electron to electron and it keeps moving in one particular solid object. In the case of convection, which happens in the case of fluid, when some amount of energy is going to be put on the system, it gets heated up, the density becomes lowered because it's warmed up, it automatically rises to the upper region and the wet or the dense water gets circulated automatically because of its high density comes down. This kind of circulation of your hot water and the cold water within a system, you call it as the convection current. The third methodology is based on radiation. This is the one which does not require any space, even it can travel in vacuum. The best example for the radiation mode of heat transfer is the one which is taking place from the sun to our earth. So, in this passive heating system, we make use of the second type of heating, that is the natural convection current, which happens by itself due to the change in the density, and this compensates and makes the water or the fluid to flow. Now, here is another best example for an active system where you make use of a solar pond. So, in this solar pond, what is happening? Let us get a brief note on that. Such solar ponds have a salt gradient which is useful in collecting the direct solar energy, and it stores in the form of heat, which may be subsequently used for some kind of low temperature applications. A solar pond basically contains 3 different zones or layers with a salt gradient, with a difference in the salt content. There are 3 zones I have told you already: the bottom zone, the middle zone and the top zone. The bottom zone is the one which contains the concentrated salt solution or the more salty brine solution. The middle zone is otherwise called as gradient zone, is the one in which half the zone contains brine, salt water, and half the zone, that is upper portion, contains fresh water. Bottom portion, which is in close contact with the bottom zone, has higher concentration of the brine or salt, and the top region contains lower content, or it contains rather a fresh water. In this zone, a gradient of salt concentration is established right from top to the bottom, and comes the top zone or the top layer where you find the fresh water available. So, this particular picture explains you how a solar pond is being used to generate the electricity from it. So, this is your solar pond where you have 3 layers. The first layer with a low salt content, which contains the cool water. The second layer is about the salt gradient layer, middle zone, and the third zone is about the high salt content hot brine zone. So, what happens when the sun is going to emit its radiation? It is getting converted into heat energy, and this fresh water transfers the heat very quickly into the bottom portion because it has a low salt content, and the bottom portion is going to get heated up very fastly. And this heated up water is not allowed to go through the convection process because it is made more denser because of the high salt concentration, and hence it stays at the bottom. Hence, you always can observe a very hot brine solution available at the bottom region and a very low salt content cool water available as a fresh water at the top region. In between, it is a gradient right from low to the higher concentrations, from the top region to the bottom region is maintained. Now, this hot solution which is available at the bottom zone is allowed to flow through this tube, and it comes to a place called evaporator. When the hot brine solution is circulated through these tubes, it collects the heat from the bottom zone, conveys the heat here and goes back, and once again it collects the heat. During this process, it leaves the heat energy here in the evaporator, and in the evaporator you basically have an organic working fluid which is available here, and this working fluid is maintained with a level over here. This gets heated up, which is a low boiling organic liquid. This gets heated up, evaporation takes place, and because they get converted to the vapor form, they flow here and makes the turbine to run in this area. Once it is converted, this flow is converted to mechanical energy in the turbine, it is converted to electrical energy through a generator over here. So this movement of the gaseous form of the organic working fluid over here makes the turbine to rotate, and the energy is retrieved from this area. After doing this performance a mechanical work, it again flows to this area, goes to the condenser, and it gets condensed, and this condensation of the working fluid happens and it becomes a liquid and then flows back again through the pump into the evaporator. Once again it gets heated up. So in the area of condenser, again there is a circulation of cold water that is maintained in order to perform the condensation process effectively over here, and this can be done by circulating the cold water from the low salt content cool water top layer of the solar pond. From here it moves and then comes back. So this is the actual process of a solar pond through which we extract the electricity from such solar ponds. Now the bottom zone, salt concentration is very high and hence the solution is denser and it maintains very hot condition. Surface zone or the fresh layer top layer is almost entirely fresh water. The pond is always lined with a clay or a plastic membrane. This is done in order to reduce any heat loss to the earth and also to prevent the salt loss from the pond system. Now the bottom zone, a little more information. The salt solution in the bottom zone is non-convective. It is working against the nature because you are maintaining the salt concentration and the density is maintained over there, and hence it is behaving non-convective in nature and hence can act as a thermal insulator too. The water in this storage zone is heated up due to the transmission of the sunlight from the top layer through the second layer to its layer. A temperature difference of about 40 to 50 degrees Celsius occurs generally between the surface zone and the bottom storage zone. Heat can be extracted from this bottom zone by either pumping out the brine to an external heat exchanger or even by placing the heat exchanger pipes in this particular zone. You can have the exchange of heat that can take place. Now an additional point, in addition to whatever we have seen in the conversion process, a photochemical conversion is also possible. For example, the produced high temperature can be utilized in reducing the zinc oxide to its metallic zinc form with the liberation of oxygen at a very high temperature of 1700 degrees Celsius. Later, the metal can react with water in order to generate hydrogen gas, or it can be used in the batteries to produce electricity. So in this way you can save the energy stored in the form of battery and then they get useful in generating the electricity. Such a type of conversion you call it as photochemical conversion. Either a battery can be used or the generated hydrogen can be used as a clean fuel gas in, for example, fuel cell and other energy systems. Now looking into the advantages and disadvantages of a solar pond. A solar pond is environmentally safe. It can provide low temperature energy for a variety of uses like thermal heating, cooling systems, desalination units, domestic and agricultural activities. One of the limitation or disadvantage of a solar pond is that leakage may cause salt contamination in the surface ground or the earth. That should be prevented effectively in the working. Achieving thermal efficiencies in a large scale definitely requires these three important things. One is it should have an efficient thermal conversion system. Secondly, achieving high temperature should be possible and it can be done by focusing the sunlight using parabolic mirrors and through various methods in order to make the mirror to face the sun throughout the day. Thirdly, temperature as high as 1800 degrees Celsius can be achieved very easily and it has been already proved by making use of ceramic pins. Few last thoughts about in the heating water. Efficiency of solar heating system is always considered to be lesser than 100% because of various reasons, like the percentage transmitted depends on the angle of incidence of the solar radiation. It depends on the number of glass sheets that are available that is going to transmit the energy from the top layer to the bottom layer, which may be around 90 to 95%, and it also depends on the nature and the composition of the glass. The solar water heating definitely saves energy, and the system also reduces pollution to a large extent. These are the few last thoughts which I want to leave it. So as a summary today, we have seen in the second part of the solar energy the two important types of conversion methods, namely thermal conversion and photoconversion, and we also looked into the principle of thermal conversion with the examples of a solar collector, how does a solar pond work, and what is photochemical conversion, and finally we touched upon the advantages, disadvantages and challenges associated with a solar pond. Here are few questions. What is the principle of thermal conversion of solar energy? What is a solar collector? What is the difference between an active and a passive heating system? What is a solar pond? How does that work? What do you mean by photochemical conversion? Thank you.